We ain't winning when we winning. We ain't winning when we winning.
Hey y'all, happy Black History Month and welcome back to the second iteration of Vestiges of Slavery. We are here today at the Frederick Douglass Isaac Myers Maritime Park in Baltimore, Maryland to talk about the creation and the origins of Black History Month, why Black History Month may have been created, and if we think Black History Month serves the same purpose as it had or as it did 100 years ago, and how it has changed over time. We picked this space to talk about Black History Month as Frederick Douglass and Isaac Myers are two huge figures in Baltimore, particularly Frederick Douglass being an international figure. But we chose this space because of not only the importance of this history, but how these figures have figured into into discussions of Black history over time, and how they've changed and been recreated or recast in certain eras of history.
For sure. We're in the Fells Point area of Baltimore. Large black population in the maritime industry during the 19th century settled here. Frederick Douglass was sent here to work from the Eastern Shore, Talbot County. Behind us, this backdrop is the wide plantation where he would have spent time as an adolescent before coming to Baltimore and working in this Fells Point area. Many people don't know about the hiring out process of slavery. It's apropos for this episode of Vestiges, right? That we talk about how slavery existed in many different forms, right? And we just think about the plantation setting. But Maryland has some has described it as America in a miniature, right? It has several different landscapes, and slavery existed in all of them, right? And Frederick Douglass came from the shore, more rural, agrarian, lush, but then he comes to Baltimore and is engaging with urban slavery, right? And this urban slavery looks a little different. It has industrial components to it that will be influential later in his life, as we probably will discuss in this. But for the purpose of Black History Month, right? Black History Month in itself is a vestige of slavery, right? And what we know is like Black History Month, our chair at Morgan State University, Dr. Scott, he'll tell you it originated with work that wasn't done by Black people, right? And Carter G. Woodson's Black History Month grew out of what was originally Negro History Week, right? And that's a deep story, right? That's still rooted in slavery and the necessity rather to tell this history, right? Explain that this history exists, just like Arturo Schomburg in Puerto Rico, when he was told that Black people ain't had no history, right? And that inspired his history, right? So his historical journey, rather. So same way with Carter G. Woodson, right? Carter G. Woodson was inspired by this, wanting to have Black people look into their Black history, right? Carter G. Woodson was the son of former enslaved people,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
Got his PhD from
Mhm.
Harvard, right? And he was dedicated to the study of history, right?
Mhm.
It was never documented that he had any wife, children, right? This man was just the consummate historian,
Yeah.
and his 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 home in the original ASALA headquarters. ASALA is the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. Then the study of a Negro life and history, right? But those are national historic sites in
Right.
Washington D.C., not too far from here. Um, Carter G. Woodson, he chose February for this Black History Month because of Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln's birthday.
Mhm. Mhm.
And maybe some of you know Black people's relationship with Abraham Lincoln,
Right.
right? Vestiges of slavery.
Mhm.
You did.
Mhm.
But Carter G. Woodson chose February
Yeah.
as Black History Month for those reasons. A lot of people think that they just gave us the shortest month. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It is ironic how it worked like that, though.
Right. That's.
Right?
I do want to go back though to uh, what you were saying about Arturo Schomburg and Carter G. Woodson, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or even just his vestige of slavery. While we have a Black History Month, Arturo Schomburg being told that he has no history,
Mm-hmm.
right? I was looking up their birth years, and Carter G. Woodson was born in 1875 in Virginia,
Mm-hmm.
and Arturo Schomburg was born in 1874 in Puerto Rico.
Okay.
Like, and slavery ends by, you know, standards in 1865.
Right.
So it's like them being born, their circumstances, right, or when they're being born, who they're being born to, where they're living, has some role, I think, or certainly in why they go on to create a Black History Month, or to creating an archive that shows Black people in scenes of history that people wouldn't particularly put them, and not even just these great men doing great things, but the slave as well, right? And them being born like not long after slavery ends, decade after slavery ends, growing up in that shadow. And then we won't get into all of the Black history, but you know, this new Negro movement
Mm-hmm.
that almost people are throwing off their proverbial chains, or you know what I'm saying, and of slavery, or of this perceived docile attitude
Right.
of Black people.
Right.
So creating this Black History Month really goes into that long tradition of resistance, but also plays into the intellectual aspect
Right.
of Black people, right? Where they're coming out of these agricultural places, or even moving into urban spaces, right? Of
Mm-hmm.
Schaumburg and Puerto Rico, and coming to the United States, and to New York in particular. Carter G. Woodson from Virginia moving to, I'm not sure, goes to a lot of different places, Schaumburg too, but migrating out of these spaces and being able to uh, intellectually and creatively think about themselves in a different light is like it breeds that curiosity of who am I other than, not other than, who am I as a Black man, right? Then who are Black people, and how are they existing within history? And there are other Black people who are having these experiences of like learning themselves, and even seeing themselves as historical figures within history, and saying there are other Black people who are doing these things to create history. We should look at them. We should talk about them. We should acknowledge them, whether they were some grand intellectual figure that got degrees, or whether they were enslaved.
Yeah. You know,
Right.
it's interesting that you said that we met the I don't know if they call themselves the White Woodsons.
Oh
right?
yeah, right.
But we met the family of the people who enslaved Carter G. Woodson's family, right? And then they was doing some work where they were looking for some type of reconciliation. But just to see that we're not that far removed from that thing, right? That you could just reach back through the sources and be right confronted with this thing like this, right?
Yeah.
That's a different level of Black history. But even to the Arturo Schomburg point, right? Carter G. Woodson, born almost a decade after emancipation, in the States, but Schomburg was born only 2 years after emancipation of Puerto Rico, because slavery didn't end until 1873 there, right? But yeah, a point that you're making that I would like to get further on is that not being about great men, right? And Carter G. Woodson founded the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, then Negro Life and History, right? For that purpose, right? To study, like you said, the Black experience in totality, right? And then over time, some of those people who were his peers would become the historical figures, right, that we celebrate today. Right? And I don't know if you grew up in a Black school, you know, you probably had the cartoon renditions of these characters on the wall, like Mary McLeod Bethune, you feel what I'm saying? Shirley Chisholm, and you know what I'm saying?
We need to get this.
So yeah, so many people I can't even just think about them now, right? Who would have been coming into prominence during the time when this man Carter G. Woodson is trying to establish this African American history. They wouldn't have been African American history yet, right? So he would have been talking about studying people more like Frederick Douglass and Isaac Myers, right? People like that. And the discipline of history, right, is doing that work with these micro histories and telling these stories. You know, that's history, like we call it with the big H, right? The discipline of history, right? But history just being a presentation of the past, right? What's largely considered public history or for general consumption, right? They only seem to focus on the same figures, right? Which has become problematic over time, right? Because as we do the historiography, right, as historians, when we study the history of how the history of these subjects have been written, how these trends have changed over time, and what things have influenced that based on the time in which it was written, right? I think modern interpretations of historical figures have left a lot to be desired for people like Frederick Douglass, right? And then I feel like it has led to some murky interpretations of historical figures like Martin Luther King, who has probably gotten so much of the exposure over time, especially around this time because of his birthday and, you know, Black History Month. He's probably been over scrutinized to a point where I don't think people are looking at him in a way that does him justice historically. I think we've come to view him in a modern context differently than the people who he would have served and engaged with would have viewed him, right? So that's, you have something you might want to add to that.
Certainly, like with our biggest thing when we talk about historiography, right, is that change over time, and I think that gets lost in our, I guess, mainstream interpretations of these figures, right? Because they're human beings, like their circumstances, their lived experience change over time. However, one thing that is a problem with just big H history or even public history or the discourse that we talk about these people is that they freeze them in time, right? And that, like I said, as historians, like that's the biggest thing that we discuss is change over time. However, these figures, like a Martin Luther King, gets frozen in time. Like when I was coming up in school in Alabama, I knew of Frederick Douglass, and we knew of him as an escaped slave who left slavery, then went on, like, published a book, went on tour talking and writing about it. And I get here, which is Baltimore specifically, and I'm engaging with him as a labor leader. And I was like, I don't see anybody talk about Frederick Douglass like as a labor leader, or seeing him in his international aspect, because he wasn't just doing things. He's in Haiti, you know, engaging with, he's in going to these places and looking at Blackness like in its totality, really, and how he engages with the history of Black people themselves, but how we engage with these figures, even like a Martin Luther King. We talk about all the time how people freeze Martin Luther King in this 1963, you know, I have a dream speech. and they don't look at him as this international figure that's talking to African like leaders and engaging with them, or they don't, or he's not painted even this day of these. Most of the time, it's government institutions or even academic ones that show him as very narrow. But again, he's meeting these African leaders. He becomes anti-militaristic, anti-capitalist in his politics. And if you look at him over time, you can see his changes and why he changes. But if you look at him in this particular aspect, you only get him as this individual who was looking only at civil rights in this aspect. And I see it as pretty sinister myself. And it's done on purpose, particularly when we think about resistance and what people think is possible. It's like, well, if we paint MLK as this reformist, we just wanted to reform capitalist society in this way, but we don't look at him as like a labor leader. And when he is assassinated, he's leading, or he's with striking workers in Memphis, right? It's like looking at them in there, I think, as they change over time, particularly MLK, because that's who we're talking about, kind of exposes, and I don't know if it needs to be exposed anymore, but exposes trends of American history within itself, with the things he's engaging with, and shows its irredeemable quality for the most part.
And that's the part that's unfortunate, right? Because sometimes people don't understand, like, okay, where am I getting this stuff from, right? Whatever, people who are not necessarily trained historians, right? They're maybe not being inquisitive enough to interrogate their sources, right? Yeah. If you engage with this history on some social media clip bites and stuff like this, are you really checking what these sources are? Like, even if you Wikipedia and doing your wiki thing, you feel what I'm saying? Are you clicking that link and seeing, well, what was their source? Their source is just some guy talking on the internet. It's like, what are we? You know what I'm saying? It's not credible, right? But even still, a lot of times people are engaging with other people's arguments, right, and not sources. And for the sake of the Martin Luther King thing, right, so much was done by the CIA to discredit this man, just like what was done with the Panthers, just like what was done with Malcolm X and Patrice Lumumba, who studied here. People don't know Martin Luther King's organizing, you know what I'm saying, is what got the attention of Nkrumah in Ghana. And that's why he was there. You know what I'm saying? When Ghana became independent. And it's like the CIA was doing so much to tear down his image. We are now examining those sources, right? Which the CIA, if they go on to find some stuff that's not good for you. That's what they're looking to do. That's what they're putting people in position to do. We already know that they infiltrate things. And I'm not saying that these, like you said, these people weren't human, right? But I think, like you said, when we talk about trends, right? Trends in what's happening outside of the world of history. When we going back muckraking, looking for what you did back and whenever you did it, that's a trend with everybody. Everybody, even our president, is being held to, okay, well, what did you do back then? Right. And this is what's happening with historical figures as well. And we're going to find some stuff, and that's what the sources show. The sources show the humanity of these people, right? Like what we talking about with Carter G. They're not just great men or women, right? They're people having a full human experience. But we can't go back and say, oh, okay, because this person did this or they said this one time that discredits the value that they have, right?
And that's the sinister nature, I think, of keeping these figures locked in history, because it doesn't encourage you to critically think about them. And that's one of the things that, as trained historians, we have to, when we find these sources, we have to critically think about them. Like, what context are they in? Like, who's writing this source? Like, is this coming from a Black newspaper? Is this coming from a white mainstream newspaper? Is this coming from the FBI? Is this coming from the CIA? Like, even in my own research, a lot of information about communists and communism come from the FBI. But I have to think, okay, this is an agency that's trying to discredit this organization or is looking at them in this particular light. So I have to think about how true these sources are, and where they're getting this information and how they're going about getting this information. And we learn that as historians But in everyday life, people learn that too, just in different experiences where you get evidence. And you're like, all right, well, what was going on? What was happening? Why would he have been doing this? What, you know what I'm saying? And not to justify any behavior, but to truly understand what is the experiences of people and the decisions they're making. And when I think of Black History Month, the point was to encourage research about Black people, about different figures, about over time these themes or these how Black people have been situated in society, racial hierarchies, and things of this nature. But when we have these particular figures that just get posted up in a society that is trying to encourage people to act in a particular way, like we are not thinking of, we should research not only these figures, but continue to research Black people, how they've existed in the United States, outside the United States, in the Western Hemisphere generally, which Sean Berg talked a lot about, in Africa and the Caribbean. And I don't personally think like that is what's happening with Black History Month anymore. Like as becoming a state-sponsored type holiday or month. It's like Juneteenth. It's like the reigning order. It's like, this is how we want you to engage with this history. This is how we want you to celebrate. Never mind how you were celebrating prior to how you understood your own history. We want you to, sure, there can be a little resistance in society, and we will uplift the resistance of MLK. We will uplift the resistance of Rosa Parks, these particular people who fit a certain mold or idea that I think is pushed out for everyday people, where it's like, you can resist a little bit, but not too much, right? And not engaging with those people as people who have a whole life experience, right? And then taking the assumptions of different institutions that paint them out in whatever way they want to look at them becomes, like you said, problematic. Because even when we have figures, even me doing my own research, I'm looking at the figures and the ideas and things from my experiences and how I understand it. And that's the point. And when we find out things, looking at, well, who said it? Like, why would they have said that? Race matters, gender matters, like
right.
Because people's experience in the world dictates what they see, how they see it, for the figures that we look at and those figures themselves, like as they were maneuvering through life.
Right. But like you said, like this is a deeper historical analysis and things that we're talking about, right? But for the people who just engage with history casually, or engage with public history, this Black History Month, I would encourage you to interrogate your sources. If you are just unconsciously coming across history feeds on your social media or whatever the case may be, right? But in the spirit of Carter G. Woodson and what he intended for Black history to be, venture out of the Mount Rushmore, if you will, of Black historical figures, right? And go explore some lesser known figures who maybe aren't as popular, but I'm sure as influential as we are in this Isaac Myers, Frederick Douglass Maritime Museum in Baltimore City. If you're in a city where you got a large Black population, I'm pretty sure there's some history there that you haven't engaged with. A museum, maybe a historical marker of some sort. And if not, maybe you could be influential in making that happen. It's a lot of that stuff happening in Baltimore because of the efforts that people are giving to make this history accessible. And that's what Carter G. Woodson would have wanted. That's what we're aiming for as we come up on a century of Black History Month, right? Starting from Negro History Week. This has been another episode of Vestiges of Slavery.
Hey, Mark, you turn me up.
I'm your friendly neighborhood double man.
And I'm Alexis.
Till next time.